The scent of exotic orchids and unforgivable betrayal hung heavy in the Miami air. Ava, was dressed for a celebration, my sister Bella's wedding reception, held in a glass pavilion overlooking the Atlantic. Everything felt magnificent, expensive, and fragile. The music was soft as we reached our assigned table. I took my seat. My husband, Dennis, moved to pull out his chair. That's when my mother, Elaine, a woman whose pride was her currency, stopped him with a sharp gesture. "Dennis," she announced, her voice audible over the soft background music, "I apologize. There seems to have been a seating error. We are short on space for non-essential guests. Your spot was needed for one of Bella's investors." The room blurred. There was a vacant, humiliating space where Dennis's chair should have been. My heart hammered with public shame. I looked at Dennis. He didn't shout. He didn't argue. He looked at my mother, then at me, and with a quiet finality that terrified me, he simply turned and walked out of the opulent Miami venue. He didn't even say goodbye. I sat there, watching his solitary figure disappear, realizing the full, brutal weight of the insult. They thought they were humiliating my husband, a simple architect. They didn't know that Dennis's silence was the prelude to a meticulously planned, multi-million-dollar revenge that would cost my family their entire future in Miami, Florida. Ava, remained seated at that table, a fixed, strained smile glued to my face, enduring the rest of the reception. Every clink of a glass, every whisper of the guests, felt like a judgment against my choice of husband. My mother, Elaine, carried on, oblivious to the emotional devastation she had caused, convinced she had handled an awkward social situation with grace. She kept repeating, "He's just sensitive, darling. He'll come back." They were utterly blind. The story of my family, the Thorns, was one of outward success and inward cruelty. My father, a powerful developer in Miami, raised both me and Bella to prioritize status. Bella, younger and far more ambitious than I, embraced it fully. My marriage to Dennis, a genuinely kind and talented but modestly paid architect, was seen as a major failure. Bella, meanwhile, was marrying Victor, a budding entrepreneur in the highly competitive Miami market, a match my parents viewed as perfect collateral. I finally returned to our small, shared apartment. The house was dark. Dennis was sitting alone in the living room. There was no rage, no tears. He was just looking at the phone, his face set in stone. "They threw you out, Dennis," I whispered, the words tasting like ash. "My own family. They called you non-essential." "They were right, Ava," Dennis replied, his voice dangerously calm. "In their world, I am non-essential. But they just made a fatal mistake. They insulted my worth without knowing the full value of the man they dismissed." I looked at him, confused. Dennis had always been honest about his modest income. "What are you talking about, Dennis? What value?" "My real job, Ava," he said, turning the phone screen toward me. The phone didn't display architectural plans. It displayed a complex corporate ledger. I'm not just an architect. I'm a venture capital analyst for the Iquitas Group. I've been undercover for 2 years, running background checks and investment feasibility studies on every major up-and-coming business in Miami. And one of my largest clients is about to take a controlling interest in Victor's new development firm. The shock was absolute. Dennis, my simple, gentle architect, was a financial shark, hiding his massive success to find genuine love. He had found love, but he had also found a direct path to the financial jugular of the family that despised him. I realized the danger immediately. Bella's husband, Victor, was financing his new high-rise project using a major loan that was tied directly to his firm's quarterly financial stability. That stability depended entirely on the approval and continued backing of the Iquitas Group's legal team, the very group Dennis worked for. "They insulted me, Ava," Dennis said, his eyes now cold and purposeful. "And in doing so, they put their entire financial house at risk. They don't deserve the success they built on lies and arrogance." We spent the next week dissecting Victor's financial statements, statements that were publicly available but rarely scrutinized. I, Ava, used my intimate knowledge of my sister's extravagant spending and my father's weak management skills to identify the flaws. Victor had inflated his projections and relied heavily on a verbal commitment from a major partner, a commitment that could easily be legally revoked. Dennis was publicly humiliated by Ava's family, but his plan is to financially ruin Victor, who didn't directly insult him. Only his mother-in-law did. Is it justified to destroy the financial future of the sister, Bella, and her husband, Victor, for the actions of the mother, Elaine? Comment below. We decided on the action. The revenge couldn't be quick. It had to be a slow, surgical strike that hit their pride and their assets simultaneously. The plan: Dennis would use his influence at the Ikitas Group to launch a sudden, meticulous audit of Victor's firm. He wouldn't expose the wedding humiliation. He would expose the financial truth that their arrogance forced him to uncover. The timing had to be perfect, just before Victor's major construction phase began. The audit was brutal. Suddenly, Victor's accounts were frozen. His projected earnings were challenged. His major partner pulled out, citing undisclosed financial instability. The shockwaves hit their luxurious Miami life immediately. Bella called me hysterical.
Ava,
What is going on? This audit is coming from nowhere. Victor is talking about losing the penthouse. You haven't heard anything, have you? You're the simple one. Maybe you know someone from the simpler parts of Miami who can help. The irony was painful. They were turning to the non-essential daughter for help. I maintained my cold distance. I haven't heard anything, Bella. But if Victor's business is collapsing, maybe he was non-essential to the market too. My mother, Elaine, finally contacted me, her voice trembling not with anger, but with fear. Ava, your father is going to lose everything if Victor defaults. That new development project was tied to his retirement funds. We need you to speak to anyone you know. Why would I, Mother? I asked calmly. I'm just a simple woman whose husband wasn't worthy of a chair. Maybe you should call one of Bella's investor friends. The inevitable happened 6 months later. Victor's development firm collapsed, defaulting on its loans. The massive, beautiful penthouse in Miami was seized. Bella and Elaine were forced to move into a tiny, cramped rental apartment. Dennis and I drove to their new, miserable apartment complex. We found Elaine weeping hysterically, surrounded by boxes, and Bella looking utterly defeated. You came to gloat, Elaine accused, her voice thick with misery. Your father would be ashamed of you, Ava. My father, I said, my voice sharp, would be ashamed of the woman who sold her daughter's husband for a seat at a dinner table. But that's not why I'm here. Dennis then stepped forward, his eyes fixed on Victor, who was sitting silently. When you sat at that beautiful dinner table, you didn't see me. You saw an empty chair. But I saw the arrogance that was built on a foundation of lies. I didn't cause your collapse, Victor. I merely exposed the truth you were hiding. Ava's mother, Elaine, is now financially ruined and weeping. Has Ava taken the revenge too far, or was total financial destruction the only way to teach her mother the value of dignity and respect? Comment now. Bella finally looked at me, realizing the full scope of the disaster. It was you. You ruined us, Ava.
No, Bella, he replied.
You ruined yourselves the day you decided my husband was non-essential. The empty chair at your wedding was a powerful statement. My response was simply a final, undeniable proof of my husband's true worth. We didn't offer them money. We didn't offer them a loan. We offered them the truth they had always run from. Dennis and I turned, leaving them in their cramped, miserable apartment. We sold our own apartment and used Dennis's legitimate investment income to buy a new, larger home in a different, quieter part of the country. I looked at Dennis. I'm sorry they hurt you, my love. They taught me a valuable lesson, Ava, Dennis said, pulling me close. Never let anyone define your worth, and always save your biggest move for the end. We left Miami, Florida, and the toxic legacy of my parents behind. The revenge was complete. We gained freedom, respect, and a love that was forged not in wealth, but in the heat of a brutal, public betrayal.